Okay, well, let's get started. Welcome, everybody. So today we are unveiling to you the new digital CMA. This comes to us via Christie's International Real Estate. It's accessible through your platform account. It's already turned on. It's in there. So I encourage you to get in there and hit that button and just get in there and practice creating CMAs. Before I turn it over to Nikki, who's going to offer you some guidance on how to build a CMA today, I'm going to suggest you challenge yourself in the way you think about a CMA. A CMA, of course, is designed to help an owner understand, what's driving value in their neighborhood, where they should position the property price-wise, and you're a big part of that, of course. What this digital CMA does over and above that is encourages them to be a participant in that conversation. Nikki's going to show us some tools in there that you can use to engage the customer via the digital CMA, and where they can return that engagement. So they can actually add their own comparables. They can remove comparables. So it gives you special insight. And I think more importantly, encourages a conversation. You're making them feel as if they are, and they should be, a participant in pricing their home. That is something that I'd be willing to bet that your competition is not doing. So think of it that way as you're going through this today. With that, I turn it over to Nikki. And Nikki, the stage is all yours.
All right. Thanks, guys. Yes, this is great participation today. We have over 100 agents on this call, so it's awesome for you guys that you're very excited to dive into the newest tool in here, which is our digital CMA. So as you can see on platform, you'll see that banner, that shiny new banner over here on the left-hand side, because there is a new tool accessible for you guys under the listing resource tab. So you can always click on here. You'll see the digital CMA is now available. You can also search for it in platform over here at the top left. So again, if I want to quickly find it, I'm on the go, I need to quickly put something together, I can go ahead and get to the digital CMA from this portion. So before we dive in and really create this, like Mike was saying, this is a great resource to send to your clients to also gauge where their mindset is at, to also kind of see what they think their home is worth, because there's a very interactive piece within the CMA. And as a person that has purchased a home or was selling their home a couple years ago, I had our agent send us the digital CMA. And for my husband, he really liked these notes that you can add, and also the ability to have a conversation directly with the client or with our agent through the CMA tool, because it broadened his mindset of where the home should be priced, because the agent did a really good job of pointing some things out. And I'm going to show you that when we dive in there today. But this is also a great thing that you can share with the client, pin or add a couple of comps into here, and then encourage the potential client, potential seller to get in there and also navigate, add comps to the CMA, add notes in there. You get these reminders, which is really great. But this is another way that you can sort of see where that client's mindset is before you sit down and have a conversation about listing price, commission, etc. So this is a really great tool to use, again, at the very beginning, similar with that digital listing presentation. And now that the digital CMA is available, it's also going to become available in the digital listing presentation, where you can really couple both of those tools and components together. And we'll share that at the end of this. All right, so when you're on platform, you can go ahead and click here where it says digital CMA. When you click on digital CMA, it's going to open up into this tab where I'm at right now, which is going to be your CMA dashboard. So for those of you on this call, no one has created a CMA yet. So when you get to this screen, it's going to be blank and say, hey, click create new to get started. So what this screen is going to show you right now is any CMA that you have in draft mode or that you've sent off to the client. And you can notice the difference between the two, because obviously if it's in draft mode, it's going to say draft. If it's not in draft mode, it's not going to have draft next to it, meaning you more than likely have actually sent this off to your client. So this dashboard here is only for you to really see what you've done and what you are in draft right now, ready to send to your client. So that's going to be the active tab over here on the left-hand side. There's also an archive tab. The archive tab, you have the ability to archive any CMA. Reason being, let's say I get a call from my neighbor who wants me to potentially list their home. They're interviewing other agents. Their price is really high. I'm not comfortable with listing it that high because I know it's going to sit. So they call me and say, hey, you did a great job. We're actually going to go with the neighbor down the street. I know that the neighbor down the street, that real estate agent, is going to list at that high price. Instead of deleting the CMA, I can archive the CMA because I might have an inkling that they might call me back in a couple of months and say, Nikki, we haven't had the activity that we were looking for. We need to price drop. We need to get this house sold. So if I archive a CMA and I get that phone call, or maybe I archive the CMA because the seller's not ready and they're like, we've got a lot going on. Maybe some personal things came up. Maybe some job stuff came up. They're not ready right now. I can always archive the presentation. And then when they call you and say, all right, now we're serious, we're ready to go, instead of completely starting the CMA all over again, I can just go ahead and return on the CMA in the archive section. So you have that ability to turn on any archive CMAs. Maybe you need to make some changes to it depending on how long of a time span that's been. And then you can go ahead and resend it to this client versus starting from scratch. And then the last tab in here is going to be your settings tab. A couple of things in here that are really important. One is going to be to allow others to manage your CMA account. So remember, in platform, we have a manage access, a delegate login. So I can give any other agent here at John R. Wood delegate access to my platform, whether they're my team member or maybe we co-list together. I can go ahead and give them access to my platform. The CMA platform is separate from that delegate access. So if I have any team members or anyone that I partner with on everything, or sometimes, I can go ahead and allow them by selecting their name here to manage my CMA account, meaning when they go to create a CMA, they can create it on my behalf in their CMA dashboard. They don't need to log in as me. So this is separate from the delegate login and platform. So I just like to call that out. If there's anyone that you might want to create a CMA on your behalf, you're going to want to go ahead and add their name here in the dropdown. And then when they go to create a CMA, they can create it on their behalf, or there'll be a dropdown where they can create it on your behalf. The last couple of things in here in your settings sections is going to be your notification settings. The first three are all set and ready to go for you. And I would leave these like this, ignore the last one for now. But these three notification settings, what they are is, one is you're going to receive an email digest of all client activity, 100%. If you encourage your clients to get in here and be interactive, me as the agent, I want to know what client is being interactive in which CMA. So the more that your clients play around, you're going to get an email every day of the activity in the CMA. Because if I have 5 CMAs going to clients right now, I don't want to go into all 5 of them every single day to check if my client did anything. You're instead going to get an email notification, which will prompt you to get into that specific CMA to see the properties your clients pinned or any notes that they wrote back to you. The second one is going to be receiving an email the first time the client has opened it, 100%. If I'm sending my client anything, I want to know that they've actually received it, had a chance to look at some of the information in there before we sit down and have a face-to-face conversation, or before I actually walk into their house to take a look at their property. And then the third is you want to receive copies of comp alerts for any newly created CMA reports. And what this is when you create a CMA and send it off to a client, you set up search parameters within the CMA. And those search parameters and how you set them up, it will automatically, on your behalf, send the client comp alerts for any new statuses. So new, under contract, anything that closed. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a direct comp for the property, but what it's doing is it's just sending them information that says, hey, these homes are also part or match some of the criteria that your agent has set up for you. So it's really just feeding the client more information of what is happening in their area, which clients do want to know, you want to know as an agent. And again, if they find that a property is very specific or a direct comp, they can go into the CMA at any time and pin that. If you make any changes in the settings account, just make sure here at the bottom right, you always hit Save Changes. All right, I'm going to go back to the Active tab. The last thing on that I want to point out in here before we dive in and actually create a CMA today is these two at the very top right. Dashboard, that will just take you to the main dashboard that we're looking at right now. So this is just me viewing all of the CMAs that I have. Back to platform, if I click on this, this will again just take me back to platform where I could go ahead and create a DLP or do something else that I need to in platform. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So to get started by creating a CMA, you're just going to click that big black button over here on the right-hand side that says Create New. I'm actually going to jump in one that I partly started to create, but you're going to click on Create New, and we're going to walk through all of those steps. So we're just going to start from the beginning here. All right, so the first part of the presentation is going to be your setup. So this is going to ask you to give your presentation a title. The title can be whatever you want it to be, and it's only an internal title, meaning it's easy for you to distinguish what CMA is what when you're looking at your CMA dashboard. Because again, the more CMAs that you're sending off, you might want to distinguish them by address, by client name, whatever makes sense to you. You're going to want to go ahead and give your presentation title a name. You can also give a note. So if there's any description about the presentation that you want to remind yourself or something about the client that you want to remind yourself about, you can go ahead and also write a short description. Again, remember, it's a private note. It's only going to be visible to you. So presentation title in the note section here is only visible to you as the agent creating this CMA. So that's going to be over here on the left-hand side. So again, this is the first part of 4 that we're going to go through to create the CMA. So we're in the setup section. Over here on the right-hand side is where we're going to go ahead and add our client information. So remember, it is a digital CMA, so I'm going to want to add their email address. There is a print option though. So let's say you have a client that doesn't have email. There is an option for you to actually print the CMA as well. But if I want to go ahead and email this to my client, I'm going to go ahead and type their first and last name, and I'm also going to put their email address in here. Phone numbers are optional. If there's a second person, so if I have 2 sellers, I'm going to want to add a secondary client to this CMA. So I can go ahead here and click on that plus sign. I can click on their name. And I'm going to go ahead and put their email address. So again, I have 2 clients in here. Let's say I have a third client. Maybe there's a third seller, or maybe there's 3 siblings selling their parents' house. At the very end, before I actually send off the presentation, I will have the ability to add additional clients to receive this. Right now, it's only asking for 2, but at the very end, before I actually send off this CMA, I will have the ability to actually send off more than 2 clients this specific CMA. At the bottom here, shortly midway in the page, it's going to say client or customized client initials. And what this is for is this is going to come into play when we actually preview the digital CMA. And the client initials are to distinguish who is doing what into your presentation. Because remember, like Mike said, and I said just a few moments ago, the CMA can be very interactive. So this is how it distinguishes in the CMA if your client did something or if you as the agent pinned a property. So the client initials are going to be here. If you want to customize the client initials, you can go ahead and type anything in this blank box. Or if you're fine with the initials that the system gives you, you can leave it as is. I always just leave the client initials as is, but you do have an option here to customize them if you want to change those initials that appear within the presentation. All right, then the last part of the presentation is going to be finding the subject property. So there's going to be 2 options for you, as you can see on my screen. On the right-hand side, it's going to ask for an MLS number. On the left-hand side, it's going to ask for the property address. If the property that the potential client is looking to sell, let's say the property is 10 years old, so maybe they've lived in the house for a long time. I might not, if I type in the MLS number here, it might not find anything because the property is a little bit older. So I always have the option to manually type in the property address over here on the left-hand side. If the property has recently been in the MLS, let's say they bought it 2 years ago, now they need to sell their property because someone is getting relocated for their job, I could go ahead and use the MLS number here and it will find it. If it's more of a recent MLS number, you can go ahead and find the subject property by that MLS number here. But you always have the option to search for the property address over here on the left-hand side. So if you're trying to find the MLS number and it's not pulling it, don't just get discouraged. You always have this option over here on the left-hand side to go ahead and manually type that address in, which I'm going to be showing you in this class. I do always say add the city of the address, just because sometimes in states there are multiple same street addresses, they're just different cities. So I always just say be very clear and concise when it comes to entering your property information for the CMA. And then I'm going to hit search. When it searches for the property, again, if we can pull from the MLS number, a lot of this information about the subject property is going to be filled in. Sometimes it's not. Again, it doesn't mean you did anything wrong. These are open text boxes, so you're going to go ahead and fill out the information for the subject property. So I'm just going ahead and fill out. Sometimes you might need to update these anyways. Let's say the house you have was a 3-bedroom 10 years ago, and they did a major extension on their home, or maybe they added on top of their home. I can go ahead and say, well, it's no longer a 3-bedroom, it's a 4-bedroom. So all of these fields I can go ahead and make changes to depending on the subject property, if any changes need to be made. Square feet and taxes are optional fields for you. So if I don't want to compare the square footage of the subject property to the other properties in my CMA, I can leave it blank. If it's something that I do want to compare to all of the other comparables that we're going to add, I would recommend adding the square footage here. But I can always go back and add this. So let's say right now as I'm creating this, I'm like, I don't really want to compare to square footage. When I get to the spot in the presentation where it starts defining what are we comparing the homes against the subject property, I can always come back to this section at any time and change that square footage or add it in here if I forgot for the subject property. Over here on the right-hand side is going to talk about the listing photo. So you have a couple of options in here. You can use a photo from the MLS. So again, if the property has recently been in the MLS, that will be an option for you to choose from. Your second option here is to upload from your computer. So let's say I sold this home a couple years ago to the client. Maybe I have an image, or maybe I drove by the property and took a picture of it so I can make this CMA very custom to the client. You can go ahead and browse and find a file to share and add that into here. You can use the Google Street View image. You can also use the no image, which I'm using here, and that is this beautiful house with this red door. So either option for you for the subject property. There are 4 options when it comes to adding your listing photo. So again, this is just step 1 of the CMA. So we've added a presentation title. Who are the clients or client that is going to be receiving the digital CMA? And then down below here is finding the information for the subject property. Again, either putting in the MLS number, or I'm manually typing in the data over here on the left-hand side to add the information for my subject property.
Nikki, I'm just going to chime in briefly because I'm anticipating a question the agents might have regarding square footage. That is the interior square footage. So the, as we call it, the under air square footage, as opposed to the total square footage, that's what you're entering. It is the living area.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. And speaking of questions, if you have any, please type them in the Q&A because we have Mike and Samantha here too that can help answer any real-time questions. So don't be shy. All right. So now that I've entered the information in step 1, which is just a setup, at the bottom right, you're always going to hit next. When you hit next, it's going to take you to the comp criteria selection. So What this is doing here is you are setting up search parameters to comb through your MLS to find comps. We're not finding comps on this section. That's in section 3, the comp search. This is simply just setting up parameters to find those comps that we're going to need to add into our CMA. So there's a couple of things in here that I want to point out and highlight. So the first is going to be, there are 5 options here for you to search properties by. You can only select one option, but there are 5 options in here for you. So there's radius. I can search by a radius. If I want to go ahead and search 2 miles out from the subject property, I can go ahead and do that. I could also limit it to a neighborhood or a city as well when I'm searching by radius. So that's one option. There's also area. So majority of you are probably going to search by area when you're searching for your parameters or setting this up. And this is where you can search within a city. Or like I'm doing here, I'm searching for a specific development name or subdivision. So again, these are 2 different options for you. And what this will do is it's going to search parameters in this specific development that I have chose. So there's a bunch in here for you. You can choose multiple if you wanted to, but that is another way that you can start searching for properties. You can draw a boundary. So again, if I wanted to take this map, I could just go ahead and draw a boundary to find my comps. I can do a building. If you are selling a condo building, and let's say there's a lot of turnover in that building, you can go ahead and choose that option. Or you can search by zip code. So one of these 5 you're going to choose from. For this example, I am going to do it by this development name here. So again, one of these 5 options you will choose from. Majority of you are probably going to be choosing this area specifically like I'm doing right now. All right. As you keep scrolling down, what you're going to start filling out is the data to, again, comb through the MLS to get the right search results on the next screen. So you can put in a search price. So you can put a search price. This is an aggressive search price. Make sure when you're adding the search price here, you add all of the zeros. If you miss anything and you get on to the next screen and you're like, where are all my search results? It could be because you're missing a 0 in your search price. So make sure you're going through this data and filling it out to find those exact comps you're looking for on the next screen. Property type is here, bedrooms. You can go ahead and put a minimum and maximum of bedrooms in here. Maybe minimum 3, depending on the area. Maybe I want 1 less, 1 more. Maybe I'm like, no, it specifically has to have a 4-bedroom in this development to be on the same price range that we're looking for. Full baths, half baths. And then there's advanced options here. It's usually unchecked. I would always recommend checking it off to see, again, how specific you want to get to finding those comps to add to your digital CMA. If you want a property with a garage, there's properties with pools. So all of these other options in the search parameter section. There's listing status here. There's also months back. So you can go as far back as 24 months. Maybe this specific development area or subdivision hasn't had a lot of properties go on the market or have closed in a while. So maybe I need to go back a little bit further with my search results. Or maybe the neighborhood's really bumping and the pricing from a year ago is completely different than the pricing that we're looking to set up today. So maybe I need to go back a shorter amount of time, maybe 6 months, maybe 4 months, because I can get enough search results from narrowing that down. Acreage, square footage. So all of these details you can fill out to, again, comb through your MLS to get search results that we're going to look at on the next screen. I do advise you when you're putting in the search parameters, the more granular you get, so the more specific you get in this section, when you get to section 3, which we're going to get to in a moment, you might not find as many search results. And I just like to point this out because if in your MLS, certain sections aren't required to be filled out. So let's say price per square foot or square footage wasn't required, and you put in an actual square footage here, and you get to the next screen and you're like, where's that listing at 1234 Main Street? I know it's, meets all this criteria, but maybe the agent didn't put in the square footage, so it's not pulling in that listing. So I just caution you when you get to the next screen, if you're looking for a specific property and it is not there, you want to make sure that you come back to this section to look at how specific your requirements are. None of this stuff, you don't have to put in a search price or bedrooms. It's all optional for you to kind of fill out the data to get search results on the next screen. So you can get as broad as you want or a little bit as specific as you need to get to the next screen. So again, section 2, all you're doing is setting up the search parameters to find search results on the next screen. The other thing I want to point out in here, the last thing in here before we look at our search results, is down here at the very bottom, it says save time creating your next CMA by saving these options as a preset. What this will allow you to do is, let's say I sell in the same neighborhood, the pricing's the same, the comps are the same, and I have a lot of activity in that area or neighborhood. I can go ahead and save these options that I filled out in this section. So I can click here, I can name it as reserve. Oops. That's what I'm going to name my search, and I'm going to hit save. So next time I go to send a potential CMA to a client in that development, what I can then do is, instead of filling out this data at the very top of this page, I can go ahead up here where it says select a preset, and I can go ahead and find that one I just created. I'd have to refresh the screen, but you can see here, once I select that reserve homes, it's going to fill in all of the search parameters with everything that I need. So now I don't have to necessarily fill out this section, because it's going to fill it out here for me, because then I can just go to the next screen where then I can find those comps. So you can set up a preset if you work a lot in the same area and the comps are going to be the same and all of this information is going to be similar. So you can go ahead and just reuse that information versus filling this section out every single time. All right, then once you fill out section 2, you're going to come here where it says next at the bottom right. And in step 3 is where you're going to go ahead and pin the comps into your CMA. So we call it pinning. You can call it adding properties into your CMA, but this is the section here where you're going to go ahead and find those properties that best match the subject property that we entered in step 1 to present to the potential client. And then again, encourage them to come in here and add their own. So multiple ways that you could add comps into here. The first, at the very top of this page, don't scroll down too fast because you'll miss this part. It's at the very top of the page above this Google map. It will say here, search by address or MLS number. Let's say I know that there's a property that is a direct comp to this subject property, and I want to make sure I don't forget to add it because I want it to be the first property that they see when they open up the CMA. I could go ahead and search for that address. I can go ahead and type in a listing number or quickly search for that address to find it. Or if any of you on this call right now have a CMA currently going out to your clients, I encourage you to transfer them over to the digital CMA. And all you have to do is take all of those MLS IDs that you've already added into your CMA, and you can copy and paste those MLS numbers here, separated by a comma. When you add all of those MLS numbers here or find a specific listing, you can go ahead and click pin these listings, and then all of those properties or that one property have been added to your CMA as a comp. So that's this section here, search by address or MLS. Again, if it's in a specific MLS ID number, or maybe you have a couple MLS ID numbers that you want to specifically add to this CMA, you can do that by clicking here. Your other option over here at the top is going to be add a custom comp. So again, there are properties that do sell off the market. And if I want to add that property, I can't search for it by address or MLS because it was never in the MLS. So if you have any off-market property comps that you want to add to the digital CMA, You're going to go ahead and click here where it says add custom comp. And then you have two options. You can go ahead and search for the property address. So you can go ahead and put in an address. It will find it. And then you're just going to have to manually enter the details and also any photos if you have any of those. So again, this is if you're adding an off-market sale. You can go ahead and enter and find that address. It combs through the USPS search. You're going to go ahead and get to the next screen to add the details. What was the price if you want to add that into here, and then any images if you have. So if I had an off-market sale that I want to add to the CMA, I might possibly have some images that I could add into here. So custom comp or search by MLS or specific address. So that is two ways to add properties to your digital CMA. Now, scrolling just a little bit down this page, we see the Google map. You'll see right here, this big icon in the middle, that is my subject property. So that is the address that we added in step 1. Then you see all of these grayed out houses nearby it. And what those are the potential comps that match that search criteria that we just set up on the previous screen, step 2. So another way that I could add properties is by using this Google map. So I could click on any of these grayed out homes. It's going to show me the property itself. If I know this address and I'm familiar with it, and I'm like, oh yes, this is a direct comp, I can go ahead and push or click on this push pin icon, and this is pinning the listing. This means I am adding this property to my digital CMA. So if I already know about this property, I can go ahead and hit pin. And then it's right here. And now I've added that property to my CMA. You'll also notice over here on the right-hand side, it will start adding up the pinned comps into your digital CMA. So it will show you how many you've actually pinned into here. So again, if I want to search another one, I can click on this grayed out home. If I'm not familiar with this property and I want to click more, I can actually click on that image of the property. And then I can scroll through. It will pull any images from the MLS that are available. And then I can also keep scrolling down, and it's going to show me some more specific content about the listing, and then the remarks and some other features about this property. So if I'm unfamiliar with this listing, I can come in here, I can research a little bit more. If I'm like, yeah, it's not a direct comp, I can just simply click on the X. So this is the third way to add comps, by looking at this Google map, clicking on these grayed out homes, and then again, either pinning it or Xing out if it is not a direct comp. So again, this is in your Google map search here. Now we're going to scroll a little bit down. Here's my subject property. Here's the one property that I just pinned into my CMA. And now we're going to go back down here. So it's telling me right now there's 17 comparable properties. If you are like, oh, that's way too little, I need more properties and to search for, you can, or maybe you have too many search results. Maybe they come back and it's 100 search results and you're like, I don't want to go through 100 of them. Let me narrow down that search criteria. What you can do in this section is right here, it says adjust comparable property criteria. If I click on this, it opens up to this box. We should all be familiar with this. We just went through this section, but if I need to make any changes, I can go ahead and change anything in this section to either get less or more search results. So again, it just opens up that search results box. Just hit save at the bottom, and then it will recalculate and find any new homes, or again, lessen the search result depending on what I edited in here. I'm not going to adjust the comparable criteria, but that is what that section means here, is going back to the last section we were just in to again narrow down or broaden our search results to get more or less search results in here. But at the bottom of step 3, again, here are all the properties that came back. I can filter by status, or maybe I want to filter by list price, depending on how high or how low I want to list this property or what I'm thinking this property should be listed at. And then again, if I'm familiar with a home, I could click the push pin icon to add it. It removes from this section and goes up to the top by all of the pinned properties. I can click on any of these images. Again, I can scroll through the options, the pictures. I can scroll down below here to, again, see if this is a direct or read more information about this property if I'm unfamiliar with it. And if I don't want it in here, I can just add an X. So all we're doing right now is I'm just going to go ahead and add a couple properties into here. And again, since this is a digital CMA and you want to encourage your client to come in here and play around in here as well, or pin properties to you, you don't want to add so many comps in here where they don't have time to look at the properties or actually open up the CMA, engage, or have an interest of what you're sending to them. So what I would recommend is just adding a couple of comps into here and then encourage them to get in here and also search and add properties. So again, you can gauge where their mindset is at before you sit down and meet with them. So I've added a couple properties into here. I'm going to scroll up into this section. So this section is going to show me all of the properties that I've pinned into the CMA. The other thing you can also do in here is you can also sort. So if I want all my active properties together, all my under contract, all my closed, I can also sort by status and it will automatically sort them for me. I can also move them around. So let's say I want this property above this one because I want this one to be the first one that they see when they open up the CMA. You can move the comps as well. So I can use this arrow to the left of the picture and I can move that as the first property that the client's going to see. Or to the left of the property, there's, if you hover over all these dots, there's that move, the mouse will say drag and reorder, and I can also drag and drop. So you can use the arrows to move it, or you can drag and drop to reorder the specific way that you want your comps to show up when you send this to your client. All right, one other thing in this section that's really important, and I truly feel like it's a great value add for you as an agent, is going to be this note section. You know, at the beginning of the class, I said when we were selling our house a couple years ago, our agent sent us our digital CMA, and under every single property, they wrote a note to us. And it was great as a seller to understand why the agent added those comps to the CMA. There were specific reasons that we didn't know, and some things they just pointed out that said, this is a direct comparable, the sizing's the same, the pricing should be the same, everything about your house and this house is very comparable. So writing these notes can help you pull out some information that a consumer might not necessarily know. So for instance, if I want to write a note under this property, and the clients will see it right underneath the property when viewing the CMA, and I'll show you in just a moment. But if I want to add a note here, here's my note. So what I can write here is I could tell my client or potential client, this property had 3 price drops. Now getting the activity. Need to. Okay, so I'm just pointing out to this potential client, this home has had 3 price drops, and now they're getting the activity at the price that they're at right now. So I'm just telling my client, hey, they've already had 3 price drops. We don't want to be the highest price property in the neighborhood or area. So we want to make sure that we are priced aggressively. So again, the house doesn't sit. We don't have to have multiple price drops. We want to get it sold very quickly at the best possible price. So that's what I'm telling my client here. I can go ahead and add another note. So I can say, added a 4th car garage. Check out the amazing backyard. So again, I'm just pulling out information or some things I want to share with that client about these specific properties. You can even write something simple as priced correctly, great comp. So again, I encourage you when you create the digital CMA that for every property you pin in here, you add a note, whether or not it's something you want to specifically pull out or tell the client about it, or some information that you have, or simply that it's just a great home and it's a direct comp, whatever it may be. But it does give the ability for you to communicate with the client, and the client also can write back to you and say, oh, wow, I didn't know that property had 3 price drops. We definitely don't want to be that high. Maybe we should list a little bit below where they are right now so we can get great activity and get this sold. So lots of options in this section. I spend a lot of time in section 3 because in this section, you're pinning the properties, you're reordering them, but they are also going through and adding those notes. Because again, it's a great value add. And this is one way that you can communicate with your client in the digital CMA. Okay, so now that I've pinned my properties, I'm going to click right here in the middle of the page where it says confirm comps. And now we're in section 4, which is the formatting section of this presentation. So a couple of things in here. Here where my lovely silhouette is, this is going to be your headshot as the agent. Remember, all of the information about you as an agent stems from your profile section in platform. If you need to change your headshot, make sure it's updated in platform, and then it feeds to all of the other tools. Here's going to be my name as the agent. Over here, where my mouse is making an infinity symbol, this is where my logo would show up. So again, John R. Wood, Christie's International Real Estate logos will appear everywhere in the presentation. But if I also have my own individual logo, I can go ahead, it will also show up right here. I don't have one, so if you don't have your own individual logo, it will look similar to mine. If you are on a team, if you are part of a team, you will see a toggle at the top here that will say team or agent. So if I want to have this CMA feature as my team, I can go ahead and toggle on my team information. So again, if you are part of a team, you will see that toggle here at the top to use your team information. Otherwise, if you're solely just an individual agent, you will go ahead and just use your information here. Underneath your name is going to say recent sales. There's a toggle here that says show or hide. So you can hide your recent sales if you don't want to show anything in your bio section. There's a quick section about you, about the agent in the digital CMA, and I'll show you that when we go to preview it in the next step. But what it's going to show you if I leave on show is it's going to show the last 3 listings that appeared on the John R. Wood profile page. So if I want to manually select the listings that I want displayed, I can go ahead and click here to manually select those listings. And a reason why you might want to manually select those listings is if I want it to be specific to the client I'm sending to. So if I want to click manually select the listings for display, you can select all 3 at one time. But this gives you the ability to showcase either how much you sold in a neighborhood or by price point. So if this price point is going to be 25 million, and I've sold homes around that price point, but it's been a while, I can go ahead and find those 3 listings that I sold simply by searching here in the manually selecting, and I can manually select those listings at that price point. Again, also by neighborhood. If I've had a ton of listings in that neighborhood before that I sold, but my last 3 were not in that neighborhood, you guys are going to want to click here where it says manually select listings. And then again, add or find those 3 listings. You're going to search for them all at once in this section here, hit select, and then those are the 3 sales that are going to show up when somebody is looking at your profile section within the digital CMA. The last thing here is going to remind you to have a short bio. So again, this gives you great opportunity to make sure you go into your profile section, go to the bio section, and make sure you have your short bio. The short bio is displayed in the digital CMA, in the digital version, and in the print version. And also it is shown in the digital listing presentation. So there's 3 places. If you are unsure if you even have a short bio, when you're creating a CMA for the first time or anytime, you can always click here where it says edit bio. It will take you directly to the spot within platform where your short bio is located, and you can go ahead and fill out that information. All right, so that's about you as the agent at the top. Down here is going to ask if you're co-listing. So if me and another agent from John R. Wood are going up for a listing together, I can go ahead and click here to add, and I can go ahead and add that agent from John R. Wood, and their information will show up in here. So that's the top, about you as the agent and any co-listing you may have. Scrolling down here is going to be the comp list detail. So over here on the left side, this is going to be the default information that we are going to compare the subject property to all of the other homes that we just pinned for the digital CMA. So this is already what we're going to compare. Over here on the right-hand side is going to be any additional criteria that you want to compare the subject property to all of the comps that we pinned in the CMA. You'll notice there are two check mark boxes. One is for digital, one is for print. If you are doing a print CMA, you only can select up to 5 additional fields to be selected, mainly to keep the template and the look match correctly. But in the digital version, you can choose as many additional criteria as you want to compare the subject property to any of the comparables within here. If square footage is important to you, remember in step 1, when I found my subject property, square footage was an optional field. If I did not fill that out, but I get to this section, I'm like, well, I do want to compare the square footage, I can just simply go back to step 1 and add in that square footage. But I do want to make sure I check it off here. When I check this off, what's going to happen is when we go to preview the digital CMA in just a moment, it's going to pull in the square footage from the subject property that I added, and then also pull in the square footage for all of the comps that we just pinned in section 3. So you want to make sure you check off anything that you want to compare. And then again, whether or not you're doing it for your digital presentation or the print presentation. All of these open text boxes here, it's asking for the subject property value. So if year built was important to me, maybe that depicts pricing, maybe that depicts a couple of different things in a neighborhood. What it's asking me here is to put in the year built for the subject property, because sometimes we can't pull that data from the MLS, depending on how old the specific subject property has been listing. Maybe it's never been listed in the MLS, and maybe it is a new construction of some sort. So this is just going to ask you, what is the 1986 is a good year. I'm going to go with that. And then again, I want to make sure that I check this off here to include that into my comp list detail. So again, this is any additional features that you want to compare side by side. Scrolling down, there are 2 sections here. This is the content order for your digital presentation, then the content order for your print presentation. They work the same way. In the digital presentation and the print, over here on the left-hand side is all of your default items that will be shown when someone's looking at your digital presentation. Some of these are optional and you can remove them. So if I don't want information about the subject property, I can drag it from the left to the right-hand side, and now it's out of my presentation. If I want it back, I can just go ahead and drag and drop back into my presentation. About the agent, it's a locked field. It can't be reordered. It's always going to be the first thing that somebody sees. Again, because if the client doesn't know who you are, you want information about yourself there. It's also a locked field because all of that information feeds from platform. In the default section, there is third-party estimates. And if you click on the pencil icon here, it's going to give you the Zestimate. And then again, sometimes it does say the Zestimate is unavailable simply, and you can always go to Zillow, and that means it's unavailable there as well. But there's also an option to add realtor.com. If you want to go to realtor.com, find out what their advertising or suggesting the home value is, I could add the property here and then check that off to also add realtor.com. The reason why we have third-party estimates defaulted into the presentation is because 90% of the time a seller has gone onto Zillow, found what their home value is on Zillow, and has called you because Zillow said their home value is worth X. You as a real estate agent, you also go on to Zillow when somebody is thinking about listing their home to see where the seller's mindset is at. I would always leave this in here because you do always know if the client looked at the Zestimate, you know what the Zestimate is. The only time I might want to remove the third-party estimates is if it's completely off. So if this one's telling me it's 2 million and I'm going to go in and tell my client we can't list above 999, I might want to remove that. I'm already going to crush their dreams. Maybe I don't want to add that into the presentation. So again, you can just drag from the left to the right-hand side anything you don't want. There are some additional things you can include in here, like resources. So if I want to move that over here to the left-hand side, there's a pencil icon. Here I can upload any documents. Maybe there's some graphs or charts or marketing things I want to add in here to show the potential client. Or I can also copy and paste a URL link. Maybe I have a branding video I want to include in here because I've never met this client. They're a referral of mine. Maybe there's a listing video I want to add in here to show the client, hey, here's something that I can do for you too. So this is additional resources. This is an optional field. If I want to upload a file, I can click here. It will take me to my computer to browse any files and add them to the digital CMA. So that's additional resources. There's suggested list price. If I want to bring that over, me as the agent, I have to add the suggested list price. I can put that price here, or I can express that as a price range. So either option, but again, you as the agent, you're providing this information in here. And then the last thing I want to tell you about is this summary. So if you want to type something out or add some content about this CMA, I can go ahead and address my client here that says, this is your CMA. Feel free to add some other properties you feel best compare to yours. Make sure you spell things correctly. All right, I couldn't save. So I could write a quick summary that my client is going to see when they open us. All right, that is the content order for the digital presentation. Content order for the print presentation, it works the same way. Default is on the left-hand side, additional options on the right-hand side. You can kind of pick and choose what you want in the print version. If you are unsure, if you're like, what does a map of comparable listings even look like? Do I want that in my presentation? For the print version, you can always click on the eyeball here and it will go ahead and preview the page for you. And then you can decide whether or not to leave it on the left-hand side or move it to the right-hand side. So again, this is step 4, which is formatting the presentation. Keep scrolling down. 3 options here. I can save and close. Maybe I just created this. Maybe you're creating this while we're in class right now, and you just want to save it as a draft mode. You're going to come back to this later. You can hit save and close. I can hit save and print. So if you want to print it, you can hit save and print. I'm going to click on save and preview because I want to show you exactly what the digital CMA is going to look like when your client clicks on the link to open it. This is exactly what your client is going to see. The only thing that they're not going to see is this menu bar at the top here, because again, they cannot edit anything. So a couple of things. Over here on the right-hand side, this is all that additional content and information about the agent. So again, here's about me, summary, property information, and average of comparables. All of this information is going to populate over here on the right-hand side. You can move this by clicking on additional content, and all that information goes to the side. So now you can really focus on the information in your digital CMA. Here's what the client is going to see. They are going to come in here. There's a scroll bar where they can go ahead and scroll from side to side. If the client is like, oh, I've never seen this house before, they can do the same thing you did when you were choosing this as a comp. They can click on the image, they can browse through the photos, and they can scroll down to see additional information about this property. And say, oh, this is a great home. I can see why Nikki picked this. So they can scroll side to side. They can also scroll right here on the right-hand side up and down. You'll see here are my notes that I added. The client can't miss them. They're right here underneath those properties. Here are also the additional fields that I added to compare. So here's square footage and year built. And again, it's going to pull in the data from the MLS for all of the comps I added into here. So here's that information. As my client, they can click here and they can write a note to me and say, oh, I didn't even know they added a 4th car garage. This house is beautiful. You know, thanks for adding that to the CMA. So they can interact with me on here. The other thing that your client has the ability to do is search. They can click on this search and they can search for properties. They can set up their own search. They can look for homes. They can pick their neighbor's house and add it and pin it as a property in the digital CMA. Remember, anything that your client does, if they are very interactive within the digital CMA, they have the ability to add that, and then you will get the email notification from that email digest that the client is interactive in that specific CMA. So you can come in here and see what they've done. You'll notice over here on the left-hand side at the bottom, here's going to be your headshot. It has a number next to it, meaning me as the agent, I pinned 7 properties into this digital CMA. Here's my client initials. Remember in step 1, we set up our client and it gave us client initials. This is where they come into play. It has a number 0 here, but if my client goes into the digital CMA and adds properties, it's going to show a number in here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, however many that they've added. So again, this is where it becomes interactive between you and the client. They can search for properties, they can pin for properties, and we can also communicate in this note section to one another. At this point, if I quickly look at this and I'm like, oh, I want to add some more properties, or I want to go make some edits, you can click on edit and go through back to any of those sections that we've already gone through when we created the CMA. I'm going to click on finish and send. So when you click on finish and send, it's going to give you a couple of other options. How often do you want those COP alerts frequencies? Meaning any new properties, any under contract properties, or any properties that close that meet the search criteria that we set up in step 2. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a direct comp. It doesn't pin any properties into your CMA. All it's doing is giving your client more information of what is going on in that area. So this is how often do you want your clients to receive that email notification? Daily, weekly, bi-weekly. So you can set up that frequency. You can also change the frequency at any time. Maybe twice a day is too aggressive if the area has a lot going on. So maybe I just want to say once a day, send them an email of any comps that match that criteria. Again, if nothing changes status in that day, they're not going to get an email from you. It's only new statuses that happen. And then again, here, you want to be copied on anything that you're sending to the client, so leave that checked. Here's going to be your client's emails that we set up in step 1. This is where I can also add an additional client. So let's say there are 3 people selling this home. When I click on finish and send, I can add a comma here, and I can add that 3rd client. Here's the subject line of the property. And then here's the body of the email that is going to be sent when you send them the digital CMA to click on the link. So in the body of this email, I always say be very specific to the client. Say, hey, Nikki and Kevin and 3rd client, it was great talking to you. Here's the digital CMA that I set up for you. Go in there, make any comments. You can also pin any properties. Looking forward to seeing you Thursday morning. Be specific to that client, add a message in this body so they know, all right, this is from Nikki. I'm cool to click on this link to open up that digital CMA. So you can go ahead and add a note here. And then you have a few options down below here. You can hit save without sending, or you can hit save and send. If I hit save and send, it's immediately out for distribution. The other thing about this digital CMA, it's real-time data from the MLS. So if my client clicks into the CMA a couple hours later and one of the active properties has gone under contract, when they go into the CMA, it will reflect that that property is now under contract because it's pulling real-time data from the MLS. So again, it will update any of those statuses as they change as the CMA is active. So you can go ahead and hit CMA, save and send. Or you can go ahead and click here where it says save without sending. I'm going to go ahead and click here that says save without sending. When I click on save without sending as well, it's also going to take my CMA out of draft mode. So, oh, look at everyone. Everyone's creating these CMAs. So it's going to take my CMA out of draft mode here so that I can go ahead and use it later on. There's a lot going on in here. I like it. All right. So a couple of things. So now we're back on our dashboard. I promise you, the first time that you create the CMA, it's not going to take you an hour to create the digital CMA. I like to be very thorough. I like to make sure we walk through all of these steps together. But practice using this CMA, practice creating it, use it on your own home for now, to get used to this and kind of check out those settings. But I want to show you just a couple of miscellaneous things in here as we are diving into here. Let me search for Anne. All right, so here's my CMA that I created. Notice the difference between these two. This is a draft mode, meaning it's not finalized. The system assumes that I need to come back in here to make edits. This one right here, I have saved, but I didn't send it to the client. You can also see here, when's the last time I sent it to them, it says never. But when I take that CMA out of draft mode by clicking on save without sending, it will allow me then to attach it into my digital listing presentation. If it is in draft mode, I cannot attach that CMA to my digital listing presentation because the system thinks that I still need to make edits to that CMA. So that's one of the big things is when you click on finish and send, you don't have to send it to the client. Just hit save without sending to take it out of that draft mode. A couple of miscellaneous things in here before we wrap up is going to be in the CMA here. When you click on these three dots underneath the CMA, you have a couple of things that you can do. You can go ahead and click on edit to make any changes, go through any of these steps that we have walked through the past hour. I can click on settings here. This will allow me to change that comp alerts frequency. Maybe my client doesn't receive it or want to receive them. I can turn them off, or I can change it to weekly, bi-weekly, etc. So that's what the settings is. I can share this. If I forgot to send it to somebody at this point, I can go ahead and share the presentation off with any additional recipients. I can clone this CMA. So let's say I'm also potentially listing the house next door. I can clone this CMA, and all I have to do is really change anything in the setup, meaning what is the address and the new clients and the new subject property, because all of the comps will be the same. My parameters are the same, so I can clone the digital CMA to even make it faster for me to send this off to the client. This is where I can archive it. So if I want to archive it because maybe I have an inkling that client's going to come back to me, I can go ahead and do that. And then the last option here is going to be delete. So if you're just creating these and then you're like, I want to go ahead and delete this to clean up my dashboard, you can go ahead and click delete. All right, lots of things. One more thing I'm going to show you is just within the digital listing presentation. So I'm going to pop in here. I'm back on platform. In the digital listing presentation, I just want to show you the spot where you're able to add the digital CMA. And that is when you are creating a digital listing presentation. If you are familiar with the home and you're confident that you can create a CMA with a couple of comps for that specific seller, when you are in your digital listing presentation, under the marketing assets section, later today, you will be able to see in this marketing assets section, there will be an option here to add a digital CMA. So we're going to turn that on for you today as well, but I just wanted to point that out. In this marketing assets section,